Welcome back, strangers. Charleston, South Carolina is an amazing city with its vibrant and fascinating sights and sounds. It's one of the major port cities along the Atlantic coast, and it's been a central hub of Southern culture for hundreds of years. However, the city has witnessed countless dark and bloody events throughout its history, leading many to believe it's one of the most haunted cities in America. We were lucky enough to visit and explore many of the creepy and haunted places in the city. Today, we're going to be discussing the most haunted places in Charleston, South Carolina. The last one is our favorite. The Dock Street Theater has a strange name. It's not actually located on Dock Street, but rather on Church Street. The building was originally built as the Planters Hotel in 1809 by Mr. and Miss Alexander Calder. The name of the hotel was coined to give honor to the guests who frequently stayed at the hotel, who were mostly planters. When it was horse racing season, planters from all over South Carolina would travel to Charleston to watch the races. Afterwards, the planters would be too tired from all of the festivities to travel back to their homes, and the hotel became their home while they were in Charleston. The famous Planters Punch cocktail was first introduced at the hotel and quickly became Charleston's favorite rum drink. The Planters Hotel ceased operation in the 1930s, and the building was left to fall apart. The city of Charleston decided to take over the restoration of the building, in partnership with the Works Progress Administration. When the construction started, an additional feature was built at the back of the hotel. They added a stage and auditorium for performances. The theater was named the Dock Street Theater, after the first theater in the city that was located on Dock Street. The historic Dock Street Theater was the first building in America built exclusively to be used for theatrical performances. However, the original theater didn't last long. There aren't any records saying what caused its closure, but it's believed that it burned down during the Charleston Fire of 1740. It was then replaced with another theater that lasted for about 40 years before it closed in the 1780s. For the citizens of Charleston, the new Dock Street Theater is one of the city's most well-known spots in the historic neighborhood of downtown. The theater is also famous for the spirits that make it one of the most haunted places in Charleston. People passing by have reported witnessing apparitions looking out from the windows of the theater before vanishing right before their eyes. Guests who have performed at the theater have stories of seeing spirits gliding down the building, ghostly shadows being seen on the rafters, and apparitions manifesting on the theater stage. There are two spirits who are infamous for making their presence felt in the building. One is the ghost of poor Junius Brutus Booth. If his surname sounds familiar, it's because he's the father of an infamous soul, John Wilkes Booth, Abraham Lincoln's assassin. There isn't an exact reason why he makes his presence known at the Dock Street Theater, because he didn't die in Charleston. He passed away in Louisville, Kentucky. His main connection with the building is that he and his theater troupe used to perform at the Planters Hotel. Booth had such a horrible temper that he had attempted to kill the hotel manager after a disagreement. Aside from that, there doesn't appear to be any other reason why he'd be haunting the old Planters Hotel. The second ghost that is frequently seen in the building is Nettie. Some people believe that her actual name was Nettie Dickerson, a resident of Charleston in the 1800s, and was a frequent face at the Planters Hotel. However, she wasn't a guest or a staff member of the hotel. She was a well-known prostitute in the area who had quite a lucrative career back in the day. Her ghost is frequently seen gliding through the Dock Street Theater before she quickly disappears. She tends to shock witnesses, as she's seen wearing a tattered but brightly colored red dress. Would you visit the historic haunted theater? When we were in Charleston, the theater was open to the public to go inside and walk around as they prepared for that week's show. It's an amazing building to visit, and to possibly have an encounter with a ghost. While in Charleston, we ate lunch at Putins Porch, a place that's well known for its amazing food and ghosts, and this restaurant does not disappoint. Putins Porch is named after the neighborhood's local stray dog, who is quite friendly and frequently dropped by the house's porch to ask for food. Bobby Ball, the owner of the lovely home, eventually turned the house into a restaurant and fell in love with Pugin, eventually adopting the little pooch. When the restaurant first opened in 1976, Pugin was there to welcome each customer, until he sadly died in 1979 and was buried in the front yard of the restaurant. To keep his memory alive, a photo of him is displayed inside the restaurant, and a statue of Pugin stands next to his grave. Customers still frequently pay their respects at Pugin's grave before coming inside for a delicious meal. Customers and staff often report seeing Pugin's ghost through one of the front windows. Others see him sitting on his favorite spot on the front porch, still waiting for someone to pat him on the head or offer him food. Yet, the ghost of Pugin is not what makes this restaurant one of the most haunted places in Charleston. The Victorian-style house that the restaurant occupies was built during the late 1800s. At the turn of the century, two sisters moved into the home. Zoe and Elizabeth St. Amand were old maids who preferred to keep to themselves. They were very close and rarely spent a moment apart. The two were always seen walking around the town together. Zoe was a schoolteacher who looked like the stereotypical Victorian teacher that you'd see in films and TV shows. She preferred to wear long, black Puritan-style smocks and wide-brimmed glasses. Zoe was heartbroken when Elizabeth passed away in 1945. She had lost her sister and her best friend. Zoe fell into depression and stayed cooped up in their old home. Her mental health suffered, and neighbors began hearing Zoe screaming her sister's name. People often saw her standing on the second-story balcony of the home, patiently looking out and waiting for her sister to return home. After several years, she refused to leave her house or speak to anyone. Finally, her neighbors decided to take Zoe to St. Francis Hospital, where she could be properly cared for. Zoe remained in the hospital until her death, and she was buried in the St. Lawrence Cemetery. However, her restless spirit returned to her old home, where it's remained ever since. There are countless stories of guests and restaurant staff witnessing the ghost of poor Zoe. A chef was opening the restaurant when he put his coffee cup on the stairs. He proceeded to open the back door for food deliveries. When he returned to retrieve his coffee, it was gone. He went to the kitchen to make another cup, but upon returning, he found his original cup where he left it, but this time, the cup had lipstick marks on the brim. Zoe is frequently seen late in the evening, when things are quieter in the building and there aren't as many customers at the restaurant. A cleaner was vacuuming the place at midnight when she felt as if someone was watching her work. She looked at a mirror and saw the face of an old woman wearing a black smock looking right at her. This reflection faded, returned, and faded away. A pastry chef of the restaurant was working in the kitchen by herself at midnight while blasting some music. She suddenly heard someone running up the stairs. She checked it out and found that there was no one up there. She went back to the kitchen and continued with her work. She was singing along to a song when another voice joined her. She expected that a coworker was the one who joined her, but she was shocked to find that she was all alone. Some of the most famous stories come from women who went to wash up in the bathroom. Female diners would only realize that Zoe's a ghost when they see her portrait hanging on one of the restaurant's walls. One female customer ended up having a conversation with Zoe. When she realized that she was talking to a ghost, she ran out screaming. The Mills House Hotel, located across the street from the restaurant, has had guests report seeing Zoe when they locked up the room's windows at night. Guests would see an old lady dressed in a black smock waving at them from a window on the second floor of the restaurant. There were two guests who knew that the restaurant had already closed and were concerned that the old lady they saw might have been locked inside. They called the police, who found the restaurant was locked, alarmed, and that no one was in the building. Would you stop in for a bite to eat at the most haunted restaurant in Charleston? If you're looking for a place to stay in Charleston where you might have your own paranormal experience, you should look into staying at the Old Battery Carriage House Inn, which was built in 1843. It was originally the home of Samuel Stevens, who was a commercial agent for plantation owners. He lived in the wonderful home until 1858, when he sold it to John Blacklock, a wealthy entrepreneur. However, Blacklock only lived there for a short period of time. The Civil War began when he was living in the home, and he witnessed the infamous siege of Charleston that left the city devastated. The damage was so extensive that it caused many wealthy families in the city to go bankrupt. Blacklock put the house up for sale, and it was purchased by Union Colonel Lathers. This upset the citizens of Charleston, but Lathers did everything in his power to restore the home to its former glory. 4 years later, he sold the home, and it went through several owners until the Society for the Preservation of Old Dwellings bought the home in the 1920s. The founder of the society turned the old house into an inn. Over the next 20 years, the hotel catered to sailors and prostitutes during World War II. It took another 2 decades for the inn to become a well-respected establishment again, before being turned into college housing for students for a few years. In the 1980s, the house sold once more to Drayton Hastie, who returned the property back to a well-known hotel in the historic district. There's at least 3 different wonders that frequently happen in the inn. The first is a phantom light that usually appears in a certain room's bathroom and sitting room. There's a reported incident where a light was joined by different shadows that a guest described as almost being like seeing a group of shadow figures gathering in the room. The second one is most terrifying. A torso will sometimes appear that seems to love floating around the place. It's believed that he might be one of the poor souls that sacrificed his life during the Civil War. Some think that he was a victim of a munitions accident that caused a huge explosion which tore his limbs apart. Witnesses describe the torso as belonging to a large, powerful soldier. They say the spirit associated with the torso isn't friendly. People report feeling a sense of dread wash over them as they witness it, before feeling the pure terror overtake them. The apparition of the torso cannot speak, but it's been reported to make guttural and menacing growling noises. Many believe the spirit just hates having guests around, and that it appears to the ones it can't stand the most. The most famous haunting is known as the gentleman ghost. He's thought to be someone from the Victorian era. His appearance usually startles female guests at the inn, as he tends to lie down beside them in bed, and he will eventually put his arm around their shoulders. There have been many instances where female guests have emerged screaming from their beds, only to see the gentleman ghost calmly get up and disappear through a wall. Many believe that he's the ghost of a college student who used to own the house until he ended his life by jumping from the roof of the old inn. If you plan on staying at the inn, be sure to ask the front desk about the best rooms to sleep in for a paranormal encounter. Room 3 is infamous for its paranormal activity, and that's where the shadow figures tend to gather. Room 8 is where you want to be if you want a chance to witness the torso ghost. Would you be brave enough to spend a night in one of the most haunted rooms at the Battery Carriage House Inn? The Old City Jail of Charleston has been around since 1802. It was where the United States' most notorious criminals were jailed for their heinous crimes. Some infamous prisoners include slaves, pirates, and even America's first female serial killer, Lavinia Fisher. These same souls are the ones who are still trapped and lingering inside the jail to this day. Before the jail was built, the plot of land where it stands was once used as a hospital, a rescue shelter, and a workhouse for runaway slaves to go to. In 1802, the city of Charleston built the jail and held its prisoners until it closed in 1939. Some of the most famous people who were incarcerated at the jail include John and Lavinia Fisher, Jack Alexander Tardy, who is known as a pirate who loved poisoning people, and Denmark Vesey, a slave leader who attempted to lead a rebellion. Civil War soldiers were also jailed at the building. The Old City Jail is now owned by the American College of Building Arts, and while it's technically off-limits to tourists, exceptions have been made. The building is so haunted that the public can only enter the place via the Haunted Jail Tour. Visitors have reportedly been spooked by heavy doors that slam on their own, objects suddenly moving and disappearing, and voices that call out and speak from the empty jail cells. A paranormal team managed to capture shadow figures running around the corridors that didn't look like they belonged to any human. Another team saw flying white orbs all over the building. Chains being dragged could be heard, even if there weren't any chains that are still in the jail. There are visitors that have also reported that they've encountered Lavinia Fisher's ghost, but who exactly is this woman, and why is she infamous? During the early part of the 1800s, Lavinia and her husband, John Fisher, owned and operated a hotel that was located 6 miles away from Charleston. It was called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House. While it was uncertain what exactly occurred in the hotel, the couple apparently murdered their rich guests by poisoning their tea and then dumping their bodies in a spiked pit beneath the hotel. There are also stories about how the Fishers are actually gang leaders, and they instructed their members to rob and murder passing travelers. The Charleston Post and Courier reported about 2 men who were attacked at the Fishers' hotel, but ended up escaping. The police eventually apprehended the couple, and a jury found them guilty for the crime of highway robbery. They were both sentenced to die. What's chilling is the fact that a few moments before she was hung, Lavinia Fisher turned to the crowd and screamed, "If any of you has a message for the devil, tell me now, for I'll be seeing him in a moment." The Ghost Adventures crew, which has a show on the Travel Channel, went to the jail in 2011 and claims that they captured an EVP of Lavinia's voice saying "the devil" when they asked a question. Aside from them, amateur paranormal investigators have uploaded their own proof of Lavinia's ghost online in the form of an EVP recording, photos, and videos. It seems as if she's the most active soul that haunts the Old City Jail. It's truly chilling to think what may have gone on inside the walls of the old jail. So many lost souls still roam around the area, making their presence known to those who visit the historic site. Would you be brave and curious enough to investigate the old city jail? Thanks, strangers, for watching. Which haunted place in Charleston, South Carolina was your favorite? Did we miss any places? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, stay strange.